Well, good afternoon to all of you here on the Midwest and East Coast, and good afternoon to those of you in other parts of the world, including the mountain states and the West Coast. Today, I'm going to be talking about, the objective that I think virtually every job seeker has, and there's two key things. One is, how do I find the right job for me? It's going to make me happy. And secondly, how do I do that in the shortest time possible? So, what I'm going to share with you are 8 things that I think you absolutely have to do well in order to shorten the time it takes to find your next job. Now, there are certain variables that you can't control, like the hiring process. And it seems to never move quite as fast as most job seekers would like it to. But there are so many things that are within your control and ways in which you can get more visibility, more credibility, and ultimately more interviews for yourself. And those are the things that I'm going to focus on here in the half hour, 45 minutes that we have together. So before I get into the content of the material, I'm going to cover just a quick things for those of you that may not be familiar with NSENG. NSENG, and the website is nsenginc.com, is the largest job search group in the United States. We have more than one member landing a new job every day, and the membership is absolutely free. And with that membership, you're going to get access to 2 free webinar recordings. We have events going on every 3 weeks typically, and it's quite possible that the next meeting that I hold may be an in-person meeting. So for those of you that happen to live in the greater Chicago area, please take note of this, and I will be sending out announcements if I'm able to pull off the appropriate venue to start conducting some of these events in person. There are over 11,800 members in this group, and it's a great place to network. I have a lot of job search tools that are actually quite cool, but very helpful to job seekers. And I have 20 webinar and workshop recordings. They vary in length from 90 minutes to 3 hours, and please check them out on the website. In addition to that, I've got a very active LinkedIn group where you can see some of the job postings that are out there for companies that are looking for folks, and it's a great place to network in a virtual environment. Job search coaching is a big part of what I do. I have job search coaching packages. I have one-on-one custom coaching services that, again, you can check out on the website, nsenginc.com. If you're interested in exploring the coaching services, please feel free to send me an email and we can set up a brief exploratory conversation. Now, this particular slide is really important to virtually anybody who's in a job search. Now, I happen to partner with a company here in the state of Illinois by the name of Microtrain. They are an approved WIOA training company, and WIOA, W-I-O-A, stands for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. It's a government subsidized program that's set aside every year, millions of dollars for job seekers to get free training. But you can only get that training from companies that are WIOA approved, and Microtrain happens to be one of those firms. So they are approved for the state of Illinois. So for any of you that live in the state of Illinois, you can check out Microtrain and go to their website at microtrain.net/NSENG. They set up a special landing page for all of the NSENG members. The way that this works is that the U.S. government sets aside a very significant pot of money. If people that are in a job search would like to get some of the training courses from a WIOA approved training company, the training company, in this case Microtrain, will work with you on applying for an application. And if your application is approved by the government, you can get anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 worth of free training. Microtrain can give this to you for free because they're going to get paid by the government, and in turn enables them to provide that training to you at no cost, absolutely no cost. And you can see here some of the programs that they provide, everything from PMP certifications to Lean Six Sigma, ChatGPT, business analysis, Salesforce administration, and many other things. Now, they aren't the only company in the country that does this. So for those of you that don't live in the state of Illinois, just do a quick Google search on WIOA approved training companies. Again, that's WIOA, and you'll find some in your local area, and you can reach out to them and work with them on getting an application in, and hopefully you get approved and you can get that training for free. It's a great way to improve, your candidacy to various companies that are of interest to you. So let's get into the 8 steps that I recommend that you've got to do extremely well. So I pose a question. One of the questions that you've got to be able to address is, who are you? And what comes from that is your branding statement. Branding statement, and we'll talk about each one of these in a little bit greater detail. The second question you've got to be able to deliver to people is, what value do you bring? This is where your value proposition summary that sits at the top of your resume, it sits in the about section of your LinkedIn profile, and it's a big part of your elevator pitch. We'll talk about that as well. You've got to be able to, determine, am I getting and delivering a really fine and dynamic first impression when I meet people, whether it's in a networking situation or in an interview, but particularly when they look at my resume and LinkedIn profile. Am I able to distinguish myself and get them to want to see more? The fourth question is, who is the audience you're trying to reach? This is where creating a target company list is so important, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Now that you know who you're trying to target, who are the individuals in every one of those target companies that you're trying to reach? In which case, you've got to create an individual influencer list. The sixth question, how can your network help you? And of course, one of your greatest assets is, in fact, your network. I've got a very large network. And I can tell you, of the 30,000 LinkedIn connections that I have, I probably don't know and never will meet 27,000 of those people. But that's okay, because every one of them serves a very important purpose for me, either who they are or who they know. And who they know is second degree connections. And this is where you can get networked into companies. And we know, statistically, individuals who get networked into a company as a referral have a far greater chance of getting an interview and a potential job offer than folks that aren't connected. Number 7 question, how do you get the word out? And this is where you've got to develop a marketing campaign. And I have a lot of discussions with job seekers. And I maintain that 90% of the job search is about marketing. It's positioning, packaging, messaging, and targeting. And that targeting piece is an actual campaign that you have to develop to reach out to those key influencers in those target companies so that you can get, people working on your behalf. The 8th piece, of course, is, how do you beat your competition? And this is where my trademark what the hell approach to job search comes into play. And we'll talk a bit about that as well. So let's get into each one of these. So the first one is developing a branding statement. Okay. And it really needs to distinguish you. Who are you? What do you stand for? And probably most important, it's the way you can make yourself memorable. Because we know in networking meetings, you end up meeting with a lot of people. They may not remember you. In interviews, okay, when you're applying to a job, okay, when you're writing cover letters, you've got to have a statement that really defines who you are so that people can remember, you know what, she's the person that had this branding statement associated with her. What are the unique competencies? Again, branding statement isn't going to be the answer to everything, but it's the starting point. And lastly, what makes you better than other candidates? So let's look at a few examples, because you've got to be able to, to write this and be able to verbalize it. But the key is in not a lot of words. This is the art of copywriting. I myself grew up as an advertising copywriter, and so I have a great appreciation for the power of the words that you put down on paper and that you recite in interviews and networking meetings. And I can't say enough about how branding statements really help set things off in the right direction. So here's just a few examples of companies that I'm sure most of us are familiar with, and what some of their branding statements were at any given point in time. Uber, the smartest way to get around. Okay, Apple, the experience is the product, and they really turned the computer industry upside down. Slack, be more productive at work with less effort. McDonald's, you deserve a break today. Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. And Old Spice, which is a great slogan that many of us, many of you maybe haven't been familiar with. If your grandfather hadn't worn it, you wouldn't exist. Again, these are things that sit in the back of people's minds when they think of some of these products. Now, you don't have the luxury of 30-second TV spots hitting your target audience time and time again, and those companies do. That's why your branding statement becomes all the more important. So here's a few examples for different kinds of roles. There's nothing to say that these are the ideal statements, but I just want to get you starting to think about what should be your statement. So for someone in project management, it might be I bring order to chaotic or complex technical projects. Someone in marketing, it might be I'm a marketing leader who's carried a sales bag, which is really important because most marketing people never go over to the dark side. Okay, they think, you know what, I don't want to sell, and the fact is if you are a marketing person who has sold, you become a much more valuable salesperson. In fact, a much more valuable marketing person, because what marketing is doing is trying to help the sales organization sell better. And if you've been in their shoes, you can be far more effective in the campaigns that you develop. Somebody that's a data analyst, and might be I translate data into business strategies. You see examples for sales and process, and for manufacturing processes that reduce waste and increase efficiency. You need to give these some thought, because these are the things that are going to sit in the back of minds of people that you're networking with, who then can convey your messaging over to people in influence, and the way that you present yourself directly to companies. Number two, you've got to create your value proposition summary. And as I mentioned earlier, it's that section that sits at the top of your resume under your contact information. You can have your branding statement followed by your value proposition. It should also sit at the very first part of your about section in your LinkedIn profile. You don't want it to be too long, but it should typically, for most people, be somewhere between 70 and 90 words. You've got to be able to identify in that summary your key attributes. What are the right keywords and key phrases? And we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between resumes and LinkedIn profiles when we get into this a little further. You want to be able to describe the kinds of problems that you solve and communicate what's your competitive edge, right? Because we know that any good job that's out in the marketplace today is getting anywhere from 1 to 200 respondents within 3 or 4 days. That's pretty intimidating to somebody in a job search. But the fact is that there are ways that you can stand out, and using the value proposition summary as the way to start things off from the very beginning to create interest and excitement is something that's going to pay dividends for you. So continuing on that. So your value proposition is going to impact your resume, your LinkedIn profile. It's going to be a key part of your elevator pitch. It's going to help you in networking situations where you've had a conversation with somebody who works inside a company, or that can introduce you to somebody inside a company of interest to you. And you want them to understand what value you bring so that they can pitch you. Your network, again, can be a tremendous sales force for you. Okay, and you need to think about them, as a sales force, because they're no different than dealers, distributors, value-added resellers, and retailers that resell products for companies that manufacture them. And now you're that product. And these are the people that can help introduce you into places that maybe you can't get into on your own. And you've got to be able to answer that all-important question: can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? This is an area that a lot of people struggle with. And it seems to be a very simple question, but you've only got about 30 or 45 seconds to create that engagement with the person on the other end who's asking you that question. And if you don't have something dynamic and memorable and impactful, you could lose them very, very quickly. So the next thing I want to share with you are just some examples of value proposition summaries that I've created for some of the folks that I've coached. Okay, and what's important here are the keywords and key phrases that are popping out here. And so rather than read the entire summary for you, this happens to be an example of somebody who was in a senior human resources role. I've highlighted for you some of those keywords that were associated with the kinds of attributes that companies were looking for this individual. Technology, data, and analytics identified some of their strengths that are separate and apart from HR: employee engagement, turnover analysis, potential risks, talent recruitment, onboarding, HR turnaround plans, market research data and best practices, change management, M&A activity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and performance processes. The important thing for everybody to go through is, what are your keywords and key phrases? And the easiest way and most accurate way to do this is take 3 or 4 or 5 job descriptions that are the kinds of jobs that are of interest to you, and grab a highlighter and just start highlighting the most important requirements. Not the qualifications, because you know whether or not you qualify for the job, but how they describe the requirements of this job. What does the individual need to do on the job? Highlight those things, and you're going to see some redundancy as you go from one job description to another, to another, to another. And those are going to be the kinds of phraseology that you want to highlight in your value proposition. Here's another quick example. This one happens to be for a marketing individual. Again, every job, the keywords are going to be different. In this case, it could be things like digital marketing, email campaigns, website development, search engine optimization, social media, marketing automation, lead generation, new product launches, go-to-market strategies, and on and on. So keep in mind that you don't want it to get too long. Okay, and I've seen plenty of value proposition summaries that are well over 100 words, and it's just too intimidating. It's overwhelming for the reader. The average reader is pretty lazy. I'm a good example of that. And the fact is, we are looking for very specific things that are going to stand out. And when you give us long, paragraphs, you begin to lose us. So it's got to be essentially the cliff notes, the summary behind your background, with using the right words so that you don't lose the reader. At the same time, you've got to be able to optimize your LinkedIn profile. And here's the big difference between a resume and a LinkedIn profile from my perspective. The resume is about less is more. How do I say all the right things in the fewest words possible? This is the art of advertising copywriting. Okay, and if you look at TV scripts or magazine ads, you'll say that typically there's not a lot of copy that's in there, but they've got the right words in there at the right moments. And so you don't want to overwhelm the reader. The LinkedIn profile, however, in my mind, is just the opposite. It's about more is more. And here's why I say that. What drives activity to your LinkedIn profile? Well, keyword matching. People are going into the back end of LinkedIn, whether they're hiring managers or recruiters, and they're plugging in the key skills that we talked about earlier in the job descriptions that you're responding to, and they're looking for people that have the most keyword matches. Every resume is going to get scored, and the people that are going to get the highest score are going to be the ones that have the most keyword matches. This is what an applicant tracking system or an ATS is looking for. And I know that, many of you complain about not hearing back, from people that you've responded to on their ads, and seemingly you thought you were an ideal candidate. Well, oftentimes it's because you didn't have enough keyword matches. You didn't get that score, and the ATS is doing it for the human being in many cases. So your resume, in fact, in about 70% of all the resumes that are submitted to a job, never really get seen at any level of depth by a human being. They're being culled by an applicant tracking system. So you've got to be able to get enough keyword matches, showing up time and time again throughout your LinkedIn profile. And by all means, both of these documents, whether it's a resume or a LinkedIn profile, are all about your achievements, your accomplishments. Don't describe things about your responsibilities, maybe a bullet point, but everything else has got to be about the difference that you've made. And your achievements need to be written in a way where there's a beginning, middle, and an end. What was the challenge you faced? What were the actions you took? And what was the results or impact of your actions? And the trick is, how do you write that in a 2-line bullet point? Again, it's the art of writing, and why I say 90% of the job search is marketing. And I can tell you 90% of that marketing is your ability to write well. And I realize not everybody has grown up as a writer. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people seek out my coaching services. But it's really important that you've got to be able to convince people in very short order why you're the candidate they need to be talking with. And it's the things that you've done in your past that they're going to be able to identify with and say, you know what, if she's done it there, she can do it here. So let's look at a quick example of a resume, in terms of optimizing your resume. This happens to be an old version of a resume of mine, but what you're going to see here is in my, you see my branding statement, marketing initiatives that drive sales growth, and then under that is my value proposition summary. And I've highlighted in blue all the keywords that are associated with the kinds of skills that they were looking for when I was applying for either a chief marketing officer or a VP of marketing role. And then as you go further down into the resume, and you don't want this area to get too long, because you want to, before you get to the halfway mark in a resume, you want to be talking about your most recent job. And there's nothing wrong with putting some key competencies under your value proposition. In fact, I encourage people to do sort of a 3x3 of key competencies, which you can change from time to time depending on the job. But you want to get right into that first, most recent job. And notice again, the things that I've highlighted in blue are very specific things that are a part of my past that were aligned with the kinds of roles that I was looking for. And to the extent that you can include metrics or any measurability, it will always make your statements that much stronger, because they want to see what impact you've had. And a lot of people think that my job isn't measurable. Trust me, every job has the ability to make a difference if you do it well. And that's what you want to be describing here. So if we move on to the LinkedIn profile, just a couple quick things. People develop quick impressions of you, if for no other reason, because of your LinkedIn photograph. And that, in combination with your banner, are going to leave people with the idea of whether or not this is somebody I want to look at further. Now, notice what each one of these folks have done in their headline. It's keyword or key phrase after key phrase after key phrase after key phrase. These are the kinds of words that has shown up for each one of them. In one case, we've got a project management expert. In another case, we've got sales and marketing and executive leader. We've got a writer in the lower left, and we've got an individual who does data and analytics in the healthcare industry on the right. They all have been able to effectively create visual imagery, and they are not artists, okay? You can get clip art or purchase things from iStock Photo or Getty Images, but at very quick glance, each one of these visually tells the reader what they stand for, and then it's supported by the keywords to create that great first impression that gets people wanting to read further on into your profile. The fourth item, you got to create a target company list. Think about the industries that you've worked in, okay? And the example I'm sharing with you here happens to be an industry that I've spent a fair amount of my career in, the wireless industry. Wireless devices. I worked at Motorola for 18 years, helped introduce products like the cell phone and a lot of other very interesting technologies. But there's more to the wireless industry than cell phones. Right. So what you want to do is take an inventory of the industries that you've been in. And for some of you, it might be only one. For others, you might have 3, 4, 5 different industries where you've got experience. Break them down. There are always sub-industries within the bigger category. List them all out, and then you've got to be able to identify who are those companies. And so what I urge you to do, create a simple spreadsheet that you can list out by industry every single company that's of interest to you. And then you want to go through the exercise of item number 5, where you're creating a key influencers list. You want to be able to list out 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 different people inside every firm that could be potential decision makers relative to the position that positions you would be applying for. So in this example, I'm showing one industry. In many cases, I had more than 20 different companies under every industry and had multiple industries. So it's not unusual to have a couple hundred, in some cases, target companies. But within each one of those target companies, you want to identify the key people that you want to get to, because you've got to be able to make them aware of your background. Not one single person is going to make the decision. And I can tell you, if you're not applying for a job in HR is not a big factor in the hiring process. The most important factor in people in the hiring process are the people that have the influence and own the budget and can make decisions. And that's typically the hiring manager and their peers. So if you're going after a marketing job, you want to go after not only that potential person who would be your boss in marketing, but also go after their counterpart in sales, in operations, in product development, in product management, maybe in legal and finance. There's nothing wrong with sending out emails to 5, 6, or 7 different people. You got to create that connectivity into the company. You got to create that visibility in the company. And this comes from building out a really robust key influencer list. So the target companies and all the companies, all the key individuals inside every one of those companies, you might have a database now of what could be a couple hundred people easily. And then just keep note, of what activity you had going on with each person that you've touched. Okay, so you want to keep a status area. Again, simple Excel spreadsheet is one way to use it. Nothing, terribly difficult about building this out. The real effort is identifying the companies and then finding the people. Now, one way you find people is through filtered searches. Okay, and I love, I've been a big user of LinkedIn over the years. I first joined LinkedIn back in 2004. And one of the great features within LinkedIn is the ability to do filtered searches that can help you find more target companies and the key people in those companies. You can find companies by industry, by geographic location. You can find people. You can find people by job titles or keywords. And now you're starting to build out that spreadsheet that we're talking about, because LinkedIn is, for me, I find to be the best database out there because it's very current. Anybody who switches jobs updates their LinkedIn profile within 2 months. So it's a very accurate accounting of people. And of course, the number of people that have a presence on LinkedIn, and it doesn't even mean that they're active, it just means they've got a profile. It's growing constantly, and it's enormous today already. So anybody who's a potential player or influencer inside a company, chances are they've got a LinkedIn profile. And the more LinkedIn connections you have, the more people you can find. So don't be one of those people that says, I only want to connect with people on LinkedIn who I know. That's a huge mistake, and I hear it from time to time from people. You are doing this for your benefit, and you will benefit yourself by always having more and more LinkedIn connections. I can tell you, when I go onto LinkedIn and start doing filtered searches, I get much bigger results and better results than the average person because of the number of connections that I have. And so you always want to be building these out. And I tell every member in NSENG, and we've got about 12,000 members in the group right now, use the group to connect with other people. It's just so easy. I too am a member of NSENG, would love to help us both expand our networks by connecting here. Great. You're going to get a very high connection rate. And as you add more and more people, you're going to be adding people that can help potentially give you introductions to people that are inside companies that you could never get into on your own. Again, the filtered searches, function is so important. Another seldom known feature on LinkedIn is the feature called Connections Of. Any person that you are connected to on LinkedIn, person's a first degree connection of yours, you can do a filtered search on all of their connections. So when people go into somebody that's got 10,000 LinkedIn connections, and the person you've networked with says, hey, if you see anybody that I'm connected to that you'd like to get an introduction to, hey, take a look at all my connections and let me know, and I'll tell you whether or not I know them well enough to make an introduction. Well, you're not going to spend the next several days looking at 10,000 LinkedIn connections. And by the way, LinkedIn's not even going to let you see all 10,000 of them. But you can filter on their connections by using the Connections Of feature. And you can say, you know what, for this person who I'm a first degree connection to, I want only people that are located in Boston and in Dallas. I want people that are in the IT industry and consumer products. And I want people that have in their headline marketing or sales. And it will then give you a listing of that person's connections that meet your criteria. Again, fantastic feature called Connections Of. Number 7 is the actual launching of your marketing campaign. Okay. You can have a great resume, a great LinkedIn profile, but you're not going to get the visibility you want unless you create activity. And that's why the first two elements I talk about in here are the value proposition, kind of at the core of what you do, along with your branding statement. And then you've got the resume, the LinkedIn profile, your target company list, and the target individuals that you want to go after. But now the question becomes, how do you get visibility? Visibility is what every job seeker needs to get. And these are some of the ways in which to make it happen. Now, the very top one is there for a reason: emails. Email marketing is an enormous part of any job search. You should be able to develop your target company list. You should be able to then have all the individuals that you want to get to. You can find out every one of their email addresses, either if you're connected to them. In most cases, they first degree connection can give you their email address, but you can go onto websites like hunter.io or Rocket Reach, and get business email addresses from individuals inside companies. And you want to be emailing. So if we take an example, there's a job for a director of finance. Well, in that case, I would suggest that you might be able to find the hiring manager on LinkedIn. But at the same time, you probably can find, again, depending upon how many LinkedIn connections you have, you might find the director of marketing, the director of sales, director of operations, director of product development, and maybe the director of or VP of HR. I would email every one of them. And there's nothing wrong with emailing a lot of people, because the fact is that human nature inside corporate environments is such that when we get emails that are directed to somebody else in the company, we want to get it off our plate. So you just forward it over to the right person, and then mission accomplished. You've sent it to somebody in operations, and in that email, you've told them, I realize you are not likely to be the hiring manager, but if you wouldn't mind forwarding my email and the attached resume over to the appropriate individual, I greatly appreciate it. And you go on with your email that's going to emphasize a few key stories in your background that relate to the job. The same thing can be done for the hidden job market, which, by the way, can be 30 or 40% of all the jobs that are out there at any point in time. They aren't advertised on LinkedIn. They aren't sitting in Indeed or Career Builder or any of these other aggregation sites. In some cases, they're sitting in someone's head. In other cases, companies have made intentional decisions to leave it up to their own employees to make recommendations. Nothing better than getting referrals into a company. And statistically, the data bears it out. People that get referred into a company end up being longer staying employees. And companies, some of the death of companies is employee turnover. It's very costly. It's very time consuming. So they want to make sure they're hiring the right person who's likely to stay longer. And one way to do that is to rely on the people inside the company to make recommendations. And that's why companies can afford to pay that individual $1,000 or $2,000 for making a recommendation who ends up getting hired. And there are ways that job seekers can create jobs for themselves, either as projects or consulting opportunities, but also as full-time work. I've done it myself on a couple occasions when I was in job searches. The fact is, if you've got a really strong and enticing email, it opens up doors in a way that a resume and a LinkedIn profile can't. Because the profiles and the resumes are very lengthy to read, and you are asking the reader to decipher whether or not you are a potential fit with the company. But in an email, you control the story. You don't control the story near to the extent in a resume or a LinkedIn profile than you do in an email. And you're going to give them a couple examples. I've got a great 90-minute video on this. It's called Resumes Tell, but Cover Letters Sell. Cover letters and email, I use the terms interchangeably, but they can open up doors by having examples that highlight things that connect you to the job that they're trying to fill, or connect you into companies that don't have a job advertised right now, but you're gonna be identifying some things that you think would be germane to the company because of what you believe they would have a need for. So all the action takes place in the target company marketing campaign. And the last item is my trademark what the hell approach to job search. Some of you may know I applied with the U.S. Patent Department many years ago and was granted a trademark for my what the hell approach to job search. The concept behind this being, what the hell do you have to lose by doing things that other job seekers are not doing? This is a game of visibility. Okay. And you've got to do things to create that visibility. And I've created 13 what the hell moves that will give you a lot more notoriety in the marketplace that other people aren't getting because they aren't willing to take chances. They aren't willing to be bold. And, again, I've got a 3-hour workshop recording on this very topic. These are tactical moves that can get you into doors even when you are rejected by the applicant tracking system. I've coached so many people who were always under the impression that if you get this rejection, email from the ATS, that the game is over. And I tell them absolutely not. The ATS doesn't even have to get a vote. That's important. The ATS is nothing more than a piece of software, and their response really doesn't count unless you allow that to count. This is why we go around the ATS. We go around, these environments that are potential roadblocks, and we get to the people that we've identified as the key influencers inside the company, and we're messaging directly to them. And there's so many things you can do that can help you get more interviews, things that can help you even get a job after you've been rejected after an interview, so that you stay in the game. And so if any of you are interested in this, feel free to email me, but the best place to go is out onto the website at nsenginc.com. Take a look at the webinar and workshop recordings. I've got 3 workshop recordings, one of which is the What the Hell approach to job search. I think you'll find the approach to be pretty novel. So these are the 8 steps that I feel you really need to do and do well. And I recognize that everybody out there isn't a marketer or a writer. But you've got to be able to do these things well. And if you need help, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to schedule, a quick exploratory conversation. A couple final things I just want to remind you of is that we owe a program. It's available to anybody in the country. For those of you that are in the state of Illinois, I urge you to go to microtrain.net/NSENG. And they can talk to you about how you can apply for that grant and get potential funding to the tune of up to potentially $10,000 worth of free training. For those of you that aren't in Illinois, there are other WEO approved training companies. Just do a Google search, you'll find them, and then reach out to them and they can help you with the application. A couple other remaining things, one is for any of you that may be considering the possibility of working with a coach, please feel free to email me. We can talk about the coaching packages and your search and how I think that, whether it's a coaching package or one-on-one coaching, how I think I can help you. And the last thing is, I just want to urge you all to get active. Okay, you can't sit by and simply answer online ads. That's not a good use of your time, because they should never take up more than about 10% of your job search week. If you haven't yet joined NSENG, please just go to the website. The membership's absolutely free. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, send me a connection and I'll give you access to my 30,000 LinkedIn connections. Join our NSENG LinkedIn group, which is separate and apart from joining NSENG on the website. Check out that library of videos, along with my podcast interviews. I get interviewed by a lot of radio, TV, and podcast individuals, and you'll hear my perspectives on different activities in the job search. Got upcoming activities, and keep an eye out. I'm hoping that maybe the next activity that I do is going to be an in-person event. So those of you that live in the greater Chicago area, keep your eyes on the website and the newsletter that I send out. Don't lose sight of the fact that we've got 17 webinar recordings, 3 workshop recordings that are all job search related. And take a look at the job search coaching services if that's of interest to you. You can always email me for exploratory conversation. NSE is a great organization. We've got great talent in here. We've got people that have had fantastic careers and for whatever reason are on the outside looking in right now. There's nothing to be ashamed about being unemployed. So many people have been through it. And we know that 2024 was a really tough year. 2025 isn't looking all that much better, at least in the early part of the year. So by all means, connect with people, grow your network, take chances, be bold, because that's what it's going to take to give you the visibility that you believe you deserve. With that in mind, thanks again for taking part in this session, and I wish you all the best with your job search.